I arrived at my wife's law firm party and said my name. The staff looked confused. Your name is not here. I looked for my wife and asked her. She rolled her eyes. Did you really think you'd be invited? I smiled calmly. I understood perfectly. And I left. But in the middle of the ceremony, her phone started ringing nonstop. You know that feeling when you're about to walk into a room where you absolutely belong, but some cosmic joke decides you don't? Yeah, welcome to my Tuesday night. I'm standing outside Holt and Barkley LLP, the glass palace where my wife basically lives, adjusting my tie for the third time because apparently I still give a damn about looking presentable at these dog and pony shows. The firm's annual gala. Black tie, champagne that costs more than most people's car payments, and enough legal eagles in one room to make the Supreme Court jealous. I push through those ridiculous revolving doors that probably cost more than my first apartment, and immediately I'm hit with that familiar cocktail of marble, money, and the faint scent of desperation masked by expensive cologne. The lobby stretches out like some modernist fever dream, all sharp angles and surfaces so polished you could perform surgery on them. There's this massive sculpture hanging from the ceiling that Sabrina once described to me as justice in motion. Personally, I think it looks like someone threw a bunch of metal scraps into a blender and called it art. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the guy who helped pay for this place. The check-in table sits dead center, manned by Priya, sweet kid, probably makes more in a year than I did my first 5 years out of college. But she's got this nervous energy that tells me she's still trying to prove she belongs here too. I walk up with the confidence of a man whose wife's name is literally on the building. Well, half the building. Holt and Barkley. You'd think that would count for something. Rowan Pierce, I say, flashing what I hope passes for a charming smile. I'm here for the gala. Priya's fingers dance across her iPad screen with the precision of a concert pianist. Once, twice. Her eyebrows do this little furrow thing that immediately tells me everything I need to know, but I'm still holding on to hope because optimism is apparently my default setting, even when life keeps serving me reality checks on a silver platter. She bites her lip, never a good sign when someone's looking at a guest list, and gives me that smile that customer service reps perfect when they're about to deliver bad news. I'm sorry, sir, your name isn't on the list. For a second, I just stand there, not angry, not confused, just processing. Like when your computer freezes and you keep clicking things hoping it'll unstick itself. Except the computer is my brain and the frozen program is my understanding of where I fit in this whole picture. I scan the lobby, taking in the scene like I'm seeing it for the first time. Partners in black tie cluster around cocktail tables, their laughter echoing off those pristine walls in a way that sounds rehearsed. Associates hover at the edges, nursing drinks and networking like their professional lives depend on it. Which, let's be honest, they probably do. Everyone's dressed to impress. Everyone's playing their part in this elaborate theater of success. And there, right in the center of it all like she was born to command a room, is Sabrina, my wife. Draped in a silver gown that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, surrounded by a semicircle of associates who hang on her every word like she's delivering the Sermon on the Mount, instead of probably discussing billable hours or case strategy. She looks magnificent. She looks powerful. She looks like she belongs here in a way that I apparently don't. I make my way over, weaving through clusters of conversations about market trends and regulatory changes, past the hors d'oeuvres table where someone's inevitably complaining about the catering budget while eating $50 appetizers. The closer I get to Sabrina, the more I can hear her voice, confident, authoritative, the voice of someone who's never doubted her place in the world. Sabrina, I say, gently interrupting whatever legal wisdom she's dispensing to her audience. Hey, there's been some kind of mistake. I'm not on the list. She turns to look at me, and for just a split second, I see something flicker across her face. Not surprise, not concern, something else. Something that makes my stomach do a little flip. Then she rolls her eyes. Actually rolls her eyes, like I'm some kind of inconvenient interruption to her evening. Did you really think you'd be invited? She asks, and her voice carries just enough volume that the associates around her can hear. Just enough edge that there's no mistaking this for playful banter. Now, here's the thing about moments like this. You know, those moments when your whole world tilts just slightly off its axis and suddenly everything looks different? Sometimes your body reacts before your brain catches up. Sometimes you expect to feel heat, anger, that burning sensation in your chest that comes with humiliation. But what I feel instead is cold. Not the angry kind of cold, not the bitter kind. Just clarity, like jumping into a mountain lake and suddenly being wide awake. I feel my chest cool, not burn. And you know what? I smile. Not the fake smile you paste on when you're trying to save face in front of people who don't matter. A real smile. The kind that comes when puzzle pieces finally click into place, when you finally understand the game you've been playing without realizing it. I understand perfectly, I tell her, and I mean it. For the first time in months, maybe years, I actually do understand. Perfectly. I turn around and walk away. Not storming off, not making a scene, just walking. Past the sculpture that symbolizes justice in motion. Past Priya at the check-in desk, who's pretending not to watch this little domestic drama unfold. Past all the partners and associates who are probably already mentally composing the office gossip they'll spread tomorrow. Through those ridiculous revolving doors and out into the night. The cold air hits my face like a slap, but a good kind of slap. The kind that wakes you up when you didn't even realize you'd been sleepwalking. I stand there on the sidewalk for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the gala continuing without me, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the party goes on. Nobody's looking for me. Nobody's wondering where I went. The machine just keeps running, smooth as ever. I pull out my phone and scroll to a contact I haven't called in weeks. Celine Park, my attorney, my oldest friend, the one person in my life who's never asked me to be smaller than I am, never suggested I dim my light so someone else could shine brighter. She picks up on the second ring. Rowan? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I tell her, and for the first time and longer than I care to admit, I actually mean it. Celine, we proceed, exactly as planned. There's a pause on the other end of the line, then a sound that might be a chuckle, might be satisfaction, might be both. Are you sure? I look back at the glowing windows of Holt and Barclay, at the celebration I'm not invited to, at the life I've been funding and supporting and cheering from the sidelines, at the woman in the silver gown who just made it crystal clear where I stand in her hierarchy of importance. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. So there I am, sitting in my car outside the Palace of Legal Eagles, and my brain decides this is the perfect time for a little trip down memory lane. Because apparently, humiliation makes you nostalgic. Who knew? I lean back in the driver's seat and let myself remember how this whole beautiful disaster started. Picture this. Me, 26 years old, thinking I knew everything about everything, walking into O'Malley's pub on a rainy Thursday night in March. The kind of night where the beer tastes better because your bones are cold and the whole world feels like it's washing clean outside. And there she was, Sabrina Holt. Though back then she was just Sabrina Morrison, a second-year law student at State, who looked like she hadn't slept in approximately 3 weeks. She was hunched over a corner table, surrounded by enough law books to stock a small library, picking at a plate of nachos that had gone cold about an hour ago. Her hair was doing that thing where it looks like she'd been running her hands through it all day, and she had this intense concentration face that made her look like she was trying to solve world hunger through contract law. I should have known right then that this woman was going to turn my life upside down. But did I listen to that little voice in my head? Hell no. Instead, I walked over and did what any red-blooded American male would do when faced with a beautiful woman stress-eating nachos at midnight. I offered to buy her another beer. I can't afford another beer, she said without looking up from her textbook. I can barely afford these nachos. And before you offer to buy it for me, I should probably mention that I'm surviving on instant ramen and the kind of panic that makes your eye twitch. I liked her immediately, not because she was gorgeous, though let's be honest, she was, but because she was real. No pretense, no games, just a woman who was honest about being broke and stressed, and probably living on 3 hours of sleep and pure caffeine. So naturally, I fell for her like a house of cards in a windstorm. That was the beginning of what I now recognize as the most expensive relationship in the history of modern romance. Not expensive because she was high maintenance. Sabrina wasn't the type to demand designer handbags or weekend trips to the Hamptons. No, this was expensive because I was an idiot who confused love with investment banking. When she mentioned that her financial aid had fallen through, and she was looking at a tuition gap that would make a grown man weep, guess who stepped up with his savings account? When she needed money for bar prep courses that cost more than my car, guess who worked double shifts at the freight company to make it happen? When she graduated and landed that entry-level position at what was then just Barkley and Associates, before they brought Sabrina's sharp legal mind and my connections into the fold, guess who refinanced his condo to help cover her student loan payments so she could focus on making partner instead of worrying about debt? If you guessed, some romantic fool named Rowan Pierce. Congratulations, you win a prize. The prize is the knowledge that love can make otherwise intelligent people do spectacularly stupid things with their financial security. But here's the thing, I wasn't being stupid. At least, I didn't think I was. I was being supportive. I was being the kind of partner who believes in his woman's dreams and puts his money where his mouth is. I was investing in our future, in the life we were going to build together once she made it through those grueling first years at the firm. I kept 2 jobs during her bar prep period. Days at Kestrel Freight managing logistics for companies that moved everything from auto parts to industrial equipment. Nights doing freelance consulting for smaller shipping operations that needed someone who could speak both warehouse and boardroom. I lived on coffee and determination, watching her study until her eyes went bloodshot, bringing her dinner when she forgot to eat, rubbing her shoulders when the stress made her neck seize up like a rusty gate. And you know what? I was proud of her. Ridiculously, stupidly proud. When she passed the bar exam, I probably celebrated harder than she did. When she landed that position at Barkley and Associates, I took her out to the fanciest restaurant I could afford, which, admittedly, wasn't saying much after all those tuition payments. And listened to her talk about her 5-year plan to make partner. That's when I made what I now realize was my first real mistake. I started making introductions. See, working in logistics means you know people. You know the guys who move stuff, the companies that need stuff moved, and the businesses that ensure all that stuff while it's being moved. You know general counsels and risk managers and procurement directors, people who occasionally need legal services and are willing to trust a recommendation from someone they've worked with. So when Sabrina mentioned that the firm was looking to expand their corporate client base, I opened my contact list like it was Christmas morning. Kestrel Freight, where I'd been working for 3 years and had built relationships with everyone from the dock workers to the C-suite. Ironvale Metals, a mid-sized operation that was growing fast and needed legal guidance on expansion contracts. Northstar Bio, a pharmaceutical logistics company that was drowning in regulatory compliance issues and desperately needed someone who understood both the science and the shipping. I made those introductions because I believed in Sabrina's abilities, because I knew she was brilliant and capable and exactly the kind of lawyer these companies needed, because I wanted to see her succeed. And succeed she did. Those clients I brought her, they became the foundation of what eventually became Holt and Barkley LLP. When Old Man Barkley decided to bring Sabrina on as a named partner, it was largely based on the client portfolio she'd built, a portfolio that, if we're being honest, I'd handed her on a silver platter. Did I ask for equity in the firm? No. Did I ask for my name on any letterhead? Hell no. Did I even ask for a formal acknowledgement of my role in building those relationships? You're getting the picture. All I wanted was a seat in the room, a place at the table during the celebrations. Recognition that I was part of this success story, not just some guy who happened to be married to the star. I wore thrift store suits to partner dinners and tried not to feel underdressed next to lawyers who spent more on ties than I made in a week. I clapped too loudly when Sabrina argued her first motion before Judge Morales, a procedural hearing that she turned into a masterclass in preparation and presentation. I learned the names of every associate, every paralegal, every person who mattered in Sabrina's professional world because I wanted to be the kind of husband who supported his wife's career. I just wanted to belong in the life we were building together. Was that really too much to ask? Sitting in my car now, watching the gala continue without me, I'm starting to think maybe it was. You know how they say the devil's in the details? Well, turns out the devil's also in the tiny little cuts that don't seem like much until you realize you're bleeding out from 1,000 paper wounds. That's exactly how Sabrina's transformation from supportive wife to whatever the hell she became happened, one microscopic dismissal at a time. It started so small I almost missed it. We're talking about the kind of thing you brush off because making a big deal about it would make you look petty and insecure. Like when your spouse corrects the way you hold a wine glass at a holiday mixer. Picture this. December, 2 years ago. Holt and Barclay's annual holiday party, back when they still invited spouses and pretended to care about work-life balance. I'm standing next to Sabrina, nursing a glass of what I'm pretty sure was a $40 Pinot Noir, trying to make small talk with some senior associate who keeps checking his phone every 30 seconds. Normal party stuff, right? Wrong. Apparently, I was holding my wine glass like some kind of barbarian. Rowan, Sabrina said, her voice carrying that particular tone that women perfect when they want to correct you without making it seem like they're correcting you. You hold it by the stem, not the bowl. You're warming the wine. Now, any reasonable person would think, okay, helpful tip about wine etiquette, no big deal. But it was the way she said it. The way she glanced around to make sure nobody had noticed my apparent breach of civilized behavior. The way she subtly repositioned herself so she was standing just slightly apart from me, like my wine-holding incompetence might be contagious. But hey, I'm a reasonable guy. I adjusted my grip and moved on with my life. Then came the Latin incident. God, I still cringe thinking about it. We're at dinner with some potential clients, a biotech company looking for regulatory guidance. And the conversation turns to some legal precedent I'd actually heard about through my work with Northstar Bio. So naturally, I chime in, trying to be part of the conversation like a good husband should. Oh yeah, I said, that's related to that old doctrine. What's it called? Residential ipsa loquitur? Except I pronounced it like res ipsa loquit you are, instead of whatever the correct Latin pronunciation was supposed to be. Close enough for government work, right? Wrong again. Sabrina actually snickered. Not laughed, not chuckled, snickered. Like I was some amateur who'd wandered into a conversation above his pay grade. Then she smoothly corrected my pronunciation while explaining the concept to the clients, effectively erasing my contribution to the discussion entirely. Her friend Kara Winters, this sharp-tongued associate who always looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe, leaned over after dinner and delivered what I now realize was the first real warning shot. You're sweet, Rowan, she said. But maybe leave the legal talk to the lawyers. You're more provincial. Provincial. Like I was some country bumpkin who'd stumbled into the big city with hay in my hair and mud on my boots. Never mind that I'd been working with corporate legal departments for years. Never mind that I understood contracts and liability and risk management better than half the associates at their firm. I was provincial. I laughed it off because that's what you do when someone insults you with a smile. You laugh it off and pretend it doesn't sting. But the hits kept coming, each one a little sharper than the last. Sabrina started asking me to arrive late and leave early at firm events. Not explicitly, of course. She was too smart for that. Instead, she'd mention that cocktail hour was really just for the lawyers to catch up on cases and suggest I show up after dinner. Or she'd point out that the after party at whatever trendy bar they'd picked was probably going to be pretty boring for you, and hint that I might want to head home early. The message was clear. You don't belong here during the important parts. Then she stopped introducing me as my husband and started going with Rowan. He's in logistics. Like my profession was my entire identity, and that identity was somehow lesser than hers. I became Rowan the logistics guy instead of Rowan, my partner in life who helped build this career you're all benefiting from. The worst part? She started telling me not to talk to clients unless they spoke to me first. Think about that for a second. I was the guy who brought half these clients to the firm in the first place. I had relationships with these people that went back years. But suddenly, I needed permission to have a conversation with someone I'd known since before Sabrina even passed the bar exam. It's not personal, she explained when I finally worked up the nerve to ask about it. It's just that clients need to see clear professional boundaries. They need to know who's their lawyer and who's not. Who's not? That's what I'd become. The guy who's not. When Northstar Bio renewed their contract, a six-figure deal that represented a significant chunk of the firm's revenue, Sabrina forgot to invite me to the celebration dinner. Forgot. Like the guy who introduced her to the client in the first place was just some minor detail that slipped her mind. I found out about it 3 days later when Kara posted pictures on social media. There's Sabrina, raising a toast. There's Trent Barkley, looking pleased as punch. There's half the firm's partnership, celebrating a victory that literally would not have existed without my connections. And there's me, sitting at home, watching Netflix and wondering when I became invisible. At home, things weren't much better. Our shared calendar. The one we'd used to coordinate our lives for years started filling up with depositions and client retreats and partner meetings. My name was never on any of it, not even for the social events that spouses typically attended. It's just easier if I handle the firm calendar separately, Sabrina explained when I mentioned it. Most of these things are work-related anyway. Work-related. Like our marriage existed in a separate universe from her career, instead of being the foundation that made her career possible. My savings account kept shrinking too. Temporary firm costs that I didn't question because I trusted her, because I believed we were building something together. Bar association dues, continuing education seminars, professional wardrobe updates, client entertainment expenses that somehow fell outside the firm's budget. Always temporary, always necessary, always coming out of my pocket. I told myself that love was investment, that marriage was about supporting each other's dreams, even when it cost you, that the temporary sacrifices would pay off in the long run when we were both successful and happy and living the life we'd planned together. But here's the thing about investments. They're supposed to have terms. Clear expectations about returns, timelines, what happens if things don't work out as planned. I had set none of those terms. I just kept writing checks and hoping for the best. Sitting in my car now, I can't help but laugh at my own stupidity. All those little dismissals, all those tiny cuts, all those moments when I should have spoken up and set boundaries. I let them slide because I thought I was being the bigger person. Turns out, being the bigger person just makes you a bigger target. 3 days before the gala, Sabrina dropped the final bomb while I was making coffee in our kitchen. You know, that fancy kitchen with the marble countertops that I'd helped finance, but apparently had no say in decorating. She was sitting at the breakfast bar, scrolling through her phone with that particular brand of focused indifference that successful people use when they're about to deliver news they know you won't like. The partner ceremony is for image, she said without looking up from whatever urgent legal matter was demanding her attention at 7 in the morning. You don't fit it. Just like that. No preamble, no gentle lead-in, no attempt to soften the blow. Just a casual announcement delivered with the same tone she might use to mention that we were out of milk or that she'd be working late again. I stood there holding my coffee mug, one of those ridiculous oversized ones that says, "World's Greatest Husband," that she'd bought me for our second anniversary back when she still pretended to think I was great, and tried to process what she'd just said. You don't fit it. Not, it might be awkward, or maybe it's better if you skip this one. Not even, I'd prefer if you didn't come. Nope, you don't fit it. Like I was a square peg trying to squeeze into a round hole, or a discount suit at a black tie event. What exactly does that mean? I asked, because sometimes when people say something unbelievably hurtful, your brain needs them to clarify just how hurtful they really meant it to be. She finally looked up from her phone, and I could see that little crease between her eyebrows that appeared whenever she had to explain something she considered obvious to someone she considered slow. It means that this event is about the firm's reputation, about presenting the right image to clients and potential clients, about showing that we're serious, professional, successful people who deserve to be trusted with million-dollar cases. And I don't fit that image. You work in logistics, Rowan. You're a good man, and you're great at what you do, but you're not. She paused, searching for the right words. You're not partner material. You don't have the background, the education, the social polish that these events require. Partner material. Social polish. I felt something shift in my chest, like a tectonic plate finding a new position after years of pressure. The social polish that comes from growing up with money, you mean? That's not what I said, but it's what you meant. She set down her phone and gave me that look, the one that said she was being patient with me, but her patience had limits. Look, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm being practical. These people judge everything: how you dress, how you speak, who you know, what you studied, where you went to school. They're looking for reasons to doubt us, to think we're not worth their 7-figure retainers. I can't afford to give them any ammunition. I can't afford. Not we can't afford. I can't afford. So I'm ammunition now. You're putting words in my mouth. No, I'm just repeating them back to you. That's when she played the card I should have seen coming from a mile away. God, Rowan, why do you have to make everything about you? This is the biggest night of my career. I'm about to become a named partner in one of the most prestigious firms in the state. Can't you just be supportive for once instead of making this into some personal drama? Supportive for once. Like the previous 5 years of financing her dreams and making introductions and sitting quietly in corners while she climbed the ladder I'd helped build were just figments of my imagination. But here's the thing about moments like this. Sometimes clarity comes not with a flash of lightning, but with the simple recognition that you've been living in the dark for so long you'd forgotten what light looked like. I didn't argue with her. I didn't raise my voice or point out the irony or launch into a speech about everything I'd sacrificed for her career. Instead, I did something that probably surprised both of us. I went upstairs, shaved with the expensive shaving cream she'd bought me for Christmas, put on my best tux, the one I'd worn to exactly 3 firm events before being quietly disinvited from the rest, and told her I'd see her at the gala. Rowan, we just talked about this. We did. And I heard you. But here's the thing, Sabrina, marriage is also presence. It's showing up for each other, especially on the big nights. So I'm going to show up. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out whether it was worth having a fight about, or if she could just handle it at the event itself. She chose option B, which tells you everything you need to know about how she really felt about me being there. Fine. But please don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. Like my mere existence at her celebration was a potential source of humiliation. That night, I called Celine Park. You know how some people have that one friend who always tells them exactly what they need to hear, even when it's not what they want to hear? Celine's that friend. We'd known each other since college, back when she was studying law, and I was figuring out that business logistics was actually pretty fascinating when you got into the nitty-gritty of how things moved from point A to point B. She'd watched my relationship with Sabrina from the beginning, and she'd been the only one brave enough to point out that my investment strategy in Sabrina's career might not be as smart as I thought it was. You need to protect yourself, she'd said about a year ago. Set up some safeguards, some leverage, some way to make sure you're not left holding an empty bag if this goes sideways. At the time, I'd brushed her off. Sabrina and I were partners. We were building something together. We didn't need safeguards and leverage and contingency plans. But Celine, being both a good friend and a damn good lawyer, had helped me set up those protections anyway, just in case. The master services contract with Kestrel Freight that gave me personal discretionary authority over their choice of outside counsel. The equity stake in the tech company that provided document management services to half the law firms in the city, including Holt and Barkley. The building sublease for the 14th floor event space that had become the firm's go-to venue for client entertainment, held by my LLC, Piers 17 Holdings, a little corporate entity that Sabrina had forgotten existed. All quiet, all legal, all perfectly legitimate business arrangements that I'd entered into during the years when I was still trying to be helpful instead of just present. Are you sure about this? Celine asked when I explained what had happened at the gala. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Once we activate these, there's no going back. She's going to know exactly what you're capable of. Good. It's about time somebody did. Because here's what I'd finally figured out. All those years of being supportive and accommodating and understanding hadn't earned me respect. They'd earned me contempt. All those years of making myself smaller so Sabrina could seem bigger had just convinced her that I was, in fact, smaller. Well, it was time to remind everyone exactly how big I could be when I needed to be. So there I am, standing on the sidewalk outside the glass palace of Legal Eagles, breathing in that crisp night air like it's the first real oxygen I've had in years. The revolving doors keep spinning behind me, carrying well-dressed lawyers in and out of their exclusive little world, but I'm done being dizzy from trying to keep up with their rotation. I pull out my phone and open up my text messages. 3 contact threads that have been sitting dormant for months, waiting for exactly this moment. 3 simple messages that are about to turn Sabrina's perfect evening into a very educational experience about the difference between partners and props. The first text goes to Marta Quintero, General Counsel at Kestrel Freight. Marta and I go way back. She was actually the one who taught me that the best business relationships are built on trust and clear communication, not fancy degrees and expensive suits. She's the kind of lawyer who gets her hands dirty, who understands that moving freight isn't just about logistics. It's about people trusting you to get their stuff from here to there without drama. I type one word, redirect. That's it. One word that activates a clause in our master services agreement that I'd negotiated 2 years ago when Kestrel was expanding their legal needs. A clause that gives me, personally, the discretionary authority to redirect all of Kestrel's outside counsel work with 30 days' notice. A clause that Sabrina had thought was quaint when I'd mentioned it in passing, like I was playing dress-up in the grown-ups business world. Kestrel represents about 40% of Holt and Barclay's monthly revenue. Funny how quaint clauses can have such non-quaint consequences. The second text goes to Rafi Danish, CEO of Nexus Legal Systems, the tech company that provides document management software to half the law firms in the city. Rafi's one of those brilliant guys who built his business from his garage and never forgot what it felt like to be underestimated by people in expensive suits. I'd invested in Nexus 3 years ago when they were still a startup looking for seed money. Not a huge investment. I'm not exactly swimming in venture capital over here, but enough to give me a 5% equity stake and a seat on their advisory board. Enough to have a say in certain business decisions, including enforcement of contract terms when clients fall behind on their integration fees. Enforce, I type. That one word is going to flip Holt and Barclay's entire document management system into read-only mode until they settle some outstanding fees that have been mysteriously under review for the past 6 months. Fees that Sabrina had assured me were just a temporary accounting issue that would be resolved any day now. The third text goes to Lydia Chun, building manager for the corporate complex that houses the 14th floor event space. Lydia runs that building like a Swiss watch. Everything on time, everything by the book, everything documented in triplicate. She's also the person who deals with my LLC, Piers 17 Holdings, which holds the sublease for the event space that Holt and Barclay uses for all their big client entertainment nights. Invoice clause, I type. That particular clause is my personal favorite. It's buried deep in the sublease agreement, written in the kind of legal language that most people skim over because they assume it's just standard boilerplate. But Celine helped me craft it specifically to address reputational breaches and conduct inconsistent with the professional standards expected of subleasee events. Turns out, publicly humiliating the primary leaseholder's representative at a gala might just qualify as conduct inconsistent with professional standards. And the remedy for such conduct? An immediate surcharge equal to 3 times the standard event fee, plus termination of future booking privileges. Sabrina had argued that our arrangement was just a handshake between friends. But handshakes aren't contracts, and I've always been better with contracts than handshakes. I hit send on all 3 messages, slip my phone back into my pocket, and drive exactly 2 blocks away to a spot where I can see the windows of the ballroom, but won't be obvious to anyone inside. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for truth. And sometimes truth needs a little help making itself heard. The interesting thing about perfectly planned events is how quickly they can become perfectly planned disasters when a few key variables change. It's like watching a complex machine that runs beautifully until someone removes a couple of crucial bolts, and suddenly everything starts making very different kinds of noises. I sit in my car and wait. Not because I'm enjoying the anticipation. Okay, maybe I'm enjoying it a little, but because I want to see how long it takes for reality to penetrate the bubble of Sabrina's perfect evening. About an hour later, as I'm listening to some classic rock station and wondering if this is what midlife crisis feels like, I can see movement in the ballroom windows. Sabrina's at the podium now, probably giving her speech about everyone who mattered and how grateful she is for all the support that made this moment possible. I wonder if she'll mention the logistics guy who helped make half of this success possible. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess no. That's when her phone starts ringing. Even from 2 blocks away, I can see the shift in her body language when she glances at her phone and sees whatever emergency is demanding her attention. Then it rings again, and again. Her wrist buzzes, probably her Apple Watch alerting her to urgent emails. Trent's watch starts buzzing too. I can see Priya hurrying toward the dais with that particular kind of urgent walk that means we have a situation. In my mind, I can practically hear the conversation happening in that ballroom. The frantic whispered conferences. The urgent phone calls to IT departments and account managers. The dawning realization that their biggest client has just activated a redirect clause that nobody thought would ever be used. That their document management system has suddenly become about as useful as a chocolate teapot until they settle some mysteriously overdue fees. that their favorite event space has just invoiced them for conduct that somebody apparently found professionally inappropriate. I imagine Sabrina's face as she processes what's happening. The confusion first, then the growing understanding, then the moment when she realizes exactly who has the power to fix all of these problems at once. The best part about having leverage isn't using it. It's the moment when the other person realizes you have it. My phone buzzes. Text message from an unknown number, but I recognize the tone immediately. Fix this. Now. I look up at the ballroom windows one more time, then put my car in drive. Some conversations are better had in person. The next morning, I wake up feeling like I've been hit by a truck full of clarity. You know that feeling when you finally stop hitting your head against a wall and suddenly realize how much your head doesn't hurt anymore? Yeah, that's exactly where I am right now. My phone has been buzzing since about 6 a.m. with increasingly frantic messages from Sabrina, but I've got more important things to do than manage her crisis. I've got some housekeeping to take care of. I make myself a proper breakfast for the first time in months. Real eggs, actual bacon, toast that doesn't come from a package, and sit down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a stack of documents that I've been meaning to review for way too long. Time to remove some safety nets that I never should have provided in the first place. Letter number 1 goes to Harbor Trust Bank. Attention. Commercial Lending Department. This is the big one. The financial nuclear option that I've been pretending didn't exist, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging just how deep I'd let myself get into this mess. Dear Harbor Trust, I type. I am writing to formally terminate my personal guarantee on business loan account hashtag 47829 BL, issued to Sabrina Holt for partner capital requirements at Holt and Barkley LLP. Here's the thing about personal guarantees that most people don't understand until they're neck deep in other people's debt. They're like co-signing for a teenager's car loan, except the teenager is a successful attorney and the car costs about as much as a small house. When Sabrina needed to come up with her partner buy-in, the chunk of change that made her a named partner instead of just another associate grinding billable hours, the bank wanted some additional security beyond her projected earnings. Enter good old Rowan, the supportive husband with decent credit and a paid-off condo, willing to put his financial neck on the line so his wife could achieve her dreams. The loan was for 18 months, just long enough for her partnership income to stabilize and prove to the bank that she could handle the payments on her own. That 18 months ended about 2 years ago, but did anyone bother to remove my guarantee once Sabrina was pulling in partner-level money? Did anyone think to mention that I was still legally responsible for her business debt, even though I apparently wasn't professional enough to attend her business celebrations? Of course not. Why would they? I was the safety net that nobody wanted to think about until they needed it. Well, guess what? Safety nets work both ways. They catch you when you fall, but they also get removed when the person holding them decides they're done being taken for granted. I print the letter on good paper, the kind that says, "This is not a joke," sign it with my fanciest pen, and set it aside for certified mail. Let's see how quickly the bank moves to replace my guarantee when they realize their backup plan just walked out the door. Letter number 2 goes to American Express Business Services. This one's almost funny in how petty it could seem to an outside observer, but petty is just another word for paying attention to details that other people ignore. Please be advised that effective immediately, I am canceling all automatic payments from my personal accounts for American Express Business Card account hashtag 3785-421896-74001, held by Sabrina Holt DBA Holt and Barkley LLP. That business card has been running through my checking account for about 3 years now. Nothing dramatic. Just the kind of charges that add up when you're not paying attention. Client dinners that somehow fell outside the firm's entertainment budget. Travel expenses for conferences that were partially personal. Professional wardrobe updates that needed to happen right away before the firm's next billing cycle. Always temporary. Always necessary. Always coming out of my account because it was easier than dealing with the firm's accounting department. You know what's easier? Not paying for other people's business expenses when you're not even invited to their business events. I calculate the running total while I'm writing the letter. 3 years of temporary charges adds up to about the cost of a decent used car. A car that I apparently bought for someone who thinks I'm too provincial to be seen with in public. The third letter is the one I'm most looking forward to writing. This one goes to Ironvale Metals and North Star Bio. The two biggest clients I'd personally introduced to Holt and Barkley back when I still believed that helping my wife succeed was the same thing as succeeding together. Dear Mr. Harrison and Ms. Patel, I write, addressing the general counsels at both companies. I hope this letter finds you well. As you know, I have had the pleasure of working with your organizations for several years in various logistics and consulting capacities. It has been my privilege to introduce you to the legal services provided by Holt and Barkley LLP, and I am gratified that those relationships have proven mutually beneficial. This is where things get interesting. See, most people assume that once you make an introduction, your role in that relationship is done. You bring two parties together, they hit it off, and you fade into the background while they do business together. But that's not actually how professional relationships work in the real world. In the real world, relationships are maintained by the people who built them. Trust transfers through personal connections, not corporate letterhead. When a general counsel trusts a vendor recommendation, they're trusting the person who made the recommendation, not just the company being recommended. However, I wanted to inform you that I will now be working with an independent firm, Moreno & Shaw, to provide legal services that better align with my consulting practice. Maria Moreno and David Shaw have built a boutique practice that specializes in exactly the kind of pragmatic, client-focused representation that I believe will serve your organizations well. I'd had lunch with Maria Moreno about 6 months ago. Brilliant lawyer, Harvard-educated, but she'd grown up in a family that ran a small trucking company before she went to law school. She understood that business wasn't just about billable hours and partner retreats. It was about real people solving real problems for other real people. She also understood that when you're building a practice, you treat the people who bring you clients like partners, not inconveniences. Moreno & Shaw has expressed great interest in working with organizations like yours, and I believe you will find their approach both professional and refreshingly collaborative. I will be happy to facilitate introductions at your convenience. The beautiful thing about this letter is that it doesn't actually say anything negative about Holt and Barkley. It doesn't even explicitly say that I'm pulling my recommendations. It just mentions that I'm now working with a different firm and would be happy to make introductions. But here's what every general counsel in America will understand when they read between those carefully crafted lines. The guy who brought us this relationship is now working with someone else, and he's suggesting we might want to consider working with someone else too. Corporate loyalty is a funny thing. Companies don't really have relationships with other companies. People have relationships with people. And when the person who built the relationship suggests that there might be better options available, smart businesses listen. I print all 3 letters on my best letterhead, sign them with my most confident signature, and drive to the post office to send them certified mail. Not because I'm trying to be dramatic, but because certified mail creates a paper trail. A record of exactly when these safety nets were removed and by whom. Sabrina calls while I'm standing in line at the post office. I let it go to voicemail. Then she calls again and again. By the time I get back to my car, I have 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails that I'm pretty sure consist mostly of various creative ways to call me vindictive. I listen to exactly one of them. You vindictive child. Her voice hisses through my phone speaker. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand that you're destroying everything we built together? Everything we built together. Interesting choice of words from someone who apparently built it all by herself and just needed me to stay out of the way. I delete the voicemail without listening to the others. For the first time in years, I have nothing to say to my wife. Turns out, silence really does feel like oxygen when you've been suffocating for this long. 2 days later, I wake up feeling like I've been sleeping for the first time in years instead of just lying in bed waiting for morning. There's something liberating about cutting ties. Like finally taking off shoes that have been pinching your feet so long you'd forgotten what comfortable felt like. I make my coffee, read the news, and decide it's time for the conversation that's been building toward this moment for months. I put on my charcoal suit, not the one I wore to firm events where I tried to blend in, but the one I wear when I need people to remember that I belong in whatever room I'm walking into. It's a good suit, well-tailored, the kind that says, I may work in logistics, but I'm nobody's sidekick. I take my time with the tie, make sure my shoes are polished, and check myself in the mirror. Today, I'm not going to Holt and Barkley as Sabrina's husband. I'm going as myself. The lobby feels different when you're not worried about fitting in. Still all marble and glass and intimidating architecture, But now it just looks like an expensive office building instead of some temple where I'm not worthy to worship. I walk up to the security desk where Ozzy's working his morning shift. "Hey, Mr. Pierce," he says with a genuine smile. "Haven't seen you around in a while." Ozzy and I had talked once about his newborn daughter, how she was keeping him and his wife up all night, how expensive formula was getting, how amazing it was to watch this tiny person discover the world for the first time. The kind of conversation you have with someone when you actually see them as a human being instead of just part of the scenery. "Hey, Ozzy, how's little Sarah doing? Still keeping you guys up at night?" "Getting better," he grins. "She's sleeping through the night about half the time now. My wife says I should appreciate it while it lasts because the terrible twos are coming." "Smart woman. Listen, I need to get upstairs. Is conference room availability still handled through Mia?" "Yeah, she's at the main reception desk now. I'll call up and let her know you're coming." See, that's the thing about treating people like they matter. They remember you when it counts. Ozzy doesn't ask why I need a conference room or whether I have an appointment. He just makes the call because we're two guys who've had actual conversations about real life. Mia, Sabrina's assistant, looks nervous when I approach her desk. Not the kind of nervous you get when you're worried about someone, but the kind you get when you're caught between competing loyalties and you're not sure which side is going to win. "Hi, Mr. Pierce," she says, glancing around like she's hoping someone will appear to handle this situation for her. "How can I help you?" "I need a conference room for about an hour. Something with good natural light, if possible." She checks her computer screen, and I can see her weighing her options. Protocol probably says she should check with Sabrina before booking me a room. Common sense probably says that the husband of a named partner shouldn't need permission to use an empty conference room. Self-preservation probably says she doesn't want to be in the middle of whatever's happening between us. "Glass 3 is available," she says finally. "It has the best view of the city." "Perfect. Can you ask Sabrina and Trent to meet me there in about 10 minutes? Tell them it's important." She nods and reaches for her phone. I head to Glass 3 to wait. Conference rooms at high-end law firms are designed to intimidate. Glass 3 is no exception. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A table that could seat 12, but somehow makes two people feel isolated. Chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of room where million-dollar deals get made and careers get destroyed. I take a seat at the head of the table, spread out 3 manila folders in front of me, and wait. Not anxiously, not nervously, just wait. For the first time in our entire relationship, I'm the one setting the terms of the conversation. Sabrina and Trent arrive exactly 10 minutes later. Sabrina's wearing her armor, a black suit that probably costs more than my car payment, the kind of power outfit that's designed to remind everyone in the room who's in charge. Trent's got his game face on too, all-pressed shirt and intimidating presence. They sit across from me like we're negotiating a hostile takeover instead of having a conversation about marriage and business relationships. Which, when I think about it, maybe we are. Trent starts talking before they're even settled in their chairs. "Whatever game you're playing with our vendors ends now, Rowan. This is business, not some personal vendetta." I slide the first folder across the table. "You're absolutely right, Trent. This is business. This is the Document Management Services Agreement between Nexus Legal Systems and Holt and Barkley." Page 7, Section 12, Subsection C. Outstanding integration fees that have been under review for approximately 18 months. I slide the second folder. This is the sublease agreement for the 14th floor event space. Page 15, Clause 47. Conduct inconsistent with professional standards, with remedies including immediate surcharge and termination of booking privileges. The third folder lands in front of Sabrina. And this is the Master Services Agreement between myself and Kestrel Freight, with full discretionary authority over outside counsel selection. Signed, witnessed, and filed with their corporate office 3 years ago. Trent opens the first folder and starts reading. I can see his expression change as he processes what he's looking at. These aren't games or pranks or emotional outbursts. These are contracts. Legal documents with actual terms and real consequences. These aren't games. I continue, keeping my voice level and professional. They're contracts that you've benefited from for years while pretending I didn't exist. Business relationships that I built and maintained while being told I wasn't partner material. Sabrina's jaw flexes, that little tell she has when she's trying to control her temper. "Why, Rowan? Why are you doing this?" "It's a good question. Maybe the only question that matters. Because you invited my introductions, my credit, my signature, my silence, just not me. Because for 5 years, I've been an investor in your success without any equity in your respect. Because you made it clear that I don't fit your image, and I've decided you're right. Trent looks up from the contracts. What do you want? I want what everyone wants in business, Trent. I want terms. Clear expectations. Mutual respect. I want to be treated like a partner instead of a problem. And if we don't agree to your terms? I lean back in my chair and look out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. All those people down there living their lives, making their deals, building their relationships on foundations of mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. Then you'll discover what it's like to run a law firm without the relationships that I brought to the table, without the financial backing that I provided, without the vendor agreements that I negotiated. You'll find out whether your success was really all about your legal brilliance, or whether some of it might have had to do with the logistics guy who wasn't partner material. The room gets very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone suddenly understands exactly how much power has shifted and in which direction. Sabrina finally speaks, and her voice is softer than I've heard it in months. What do you want from me, Rowan? I want you to decide whether you want a husband or a silent investor. Because I'm done being both. You know what they say about throwing stones in glass houses? Well, turns out when you're dealing with a law firm that's basically one giant glass house, even the smallest pebbles can cause some pretty spectacular damage. By 5 o'clock that evening, the legal press had picked up the story, and by 6, my phone was buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. Anchor client leaves Holt and Barkley after partner gala, reads the headline in Legal Tribune. Not exactly Pulitzer Prize material, but you've got to love how fast news travels in the incestuous world of corporate law. Apparently, when a 40% revenue client suddenly redirects their business, people notice. Who would have thought? My phone starts ringing around 6:15. First call comes from some reporter at American Lawyer magazine who probably Googled Rowan Pierce and found my LinkedIn profile in about 30 seconds. Mr. Pierce, this is Jessica Chun from American Lawyer. I'm calling about the situation with Kestrel Freight and Holt and Barkley. Would you be willing to provide a comment on the circumstances surrounding your decision to redirect their legal services? I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then another. By 7 p.m., I've got reporters from Legal Week, the National Law Journal, and something called Corporate Counsel Today, all wanting to hear my side of the story. Here's the thing about being on the other side of a news story for the first time in your life. Everybody wants to make you the villain or the hero, and nobody's particularly interested in the truth, which is usually somewhere in the boring middle. They want drama, conflict, betrayal, revenge, basically a soap opera with billable hours. But I don't give them what they want. I don't give them anything. Celine, being the excellent attorney and better friend that she is, had prepared for this exact scenario. She issues exactly one statement, probably the most diplomatically worded "go screw yourselves" in the history of legal press releases. Our client wishes the firm well. He is merely aligning his business relationships with organizations that demonstrate mutual respect for all parties involved. That's it. No accusations, no drama, no juicy quotes about marital discord or professional slights. Just a polite way of saying that respect is a two-way street, and some people apparently need GPS to find it. But here's where things get interesting, because while I'm maintaining radio silence, other people aren't being quite so diplomatic. Inside Holt and Barkley, the partners are apparently having what you might generously call strategic discussions and what you might more accurately call a complete meltdown. I know this because Mia, sweet, nervous Mia who booked me that conference room, sends me a text around 8 p.m. Just wanted you to know that some of us remember all the times you helped out. This isn't right. 20 minutes later, Kara Winters. Sabrina's sharp-tongued ally and my personal candidate for most likely to make snide comments at a funeral, posts something on her Instagram story that she probably thinks is subtle but actually lands like a brick through a window. Some people can't handle when others succeed, she writes, over a picture of what looks like expensive wine in what's probably an expensive restaurant. Disgruntled spouses who try to sabotage their partner's career are the worst kind of toxic. #blessed, #partnership, #success. Now, Kara apparently forgot a few important things when she decided to take her passive-aggressive show public. First, she forgot that the internet never sleeps, and has a very long memory. Second, she forgot that I've been part of this firm's ecosystem for 5 years, which means there are a lot of photos and emails and documents floating around that tell a very different story than the one she's trying to spin. Within 2 hours, someone, and I honestly have no idea who, but God bless them, starts posting receipts in the comments of her Instagram story. Photos from previous firm events where Sabrina is literally thanking me for making tonight possible. Screenshots of emails where I'm CC'd as the client liaison for major deals. Copies of invitations to firm celebrations that explicitly mention my contributions to successful closings. My personal favorite is a photo from about 18 months ago where Sabrina is presenting some client with a commemorative plaque, and I'm standing right next to her with a big smile, because I'd been the one who spent 3 days in a warehouse in Cleveland making sure their discovery materials got processed correctly. The caption on the original post, which someone helpfully screenshots, reads, "None of this would have been possible without my amazing husband's expertise and connections." Amazing husband's expertise and connections. Funny how that transforms into disgruntled spouse when the amazing husband finally gets tired of being treated like hired help. The internet being what it is, Kara's post gets ratioed into oblivion. People start commenting with fire emojis and "this you" responses, and within about 4 hours, she deletes the whole thing and makes her account private. But screenshots are forever, and the story has already grown legs. What started as anchor client leaves law firm becomes law firm partner's husband built their client base, then gets excluded from celebration. Then it becomes the man behind the success story speaks by not speaking. Then some blogger at Above the Law writes a piece called "When Your +1 Built Your Career But Isn't +1 Material" that gets shared about 1,000 times. The narrative doesn't become a scandal, exactly. It becomes something more dangerous for a firm that depends on reputation. It becomes symmetry. The story of someone who gave everything to build something and then got told they didn't belong in the thing they'd built. The kind of story that makes potential clients wonder what kind of people they're really doing business with. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my living room, eating Chinese takeout, and watching the whole thing unfold from a comfortable distance. My phone keeps buzzing with text messages. Some from reporters I ignore, some from old colleagues expressing support, and a few from people I barely know who apparently think this whole situation is hilarious. Around 10 p.m., I get a text from Maria Moreno at Moreno & Shaw. Ironvale and Northstar both called today. Very interested in discussing a transition. Also, you're officially the most popular man in legal gossip circles right now. How does it feel to be famous? I text back. Like I'm finally getting credit for work I did years ago. The best part about the whole media circus is that I don't have to manage it, defend it, or explain it. The facts speak for themselves, and the facts are pretty simple. I built relationships, I got results, I supported success, and then I got told I wasn't good enough to celebrate that success. Sometimes the truth is the best revenge because it doesn't require any embellishment. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzes one more time. Sabrina, texting from what I assume is Damage Control Central. This has gone too far. We need to talk. I look at the message for about 30 seconds, then turn off my phone and go to bed. For the first time in months, I sleep like a baby. They say that consequences have a way of arriving in their own time, but apparently nobody told them that sometimes they show up early and bring friends. Over the next 2 weeks, I get to watch the domino effect of my little rebellion play out in real time, and I've got to admit, it's better than any premium cable drama series. The first domino falls exactly 48 hours after my glass conference room performance. Harbor Trust Bank, those lovely folks who've been enjoying my personal guarantee on Sabrina's partner loan for way longer than originally planned, sends a very formal letter to both of us explaining that they'll need to restructure the lending arrangement now that the original guarantor has withdrawn his support. Banking language is a beautiful thing when you know how to read between the lines. Restructure the lending arrangement translates roughly to, we still want our money, but now we're going to charge you a lot more for the privilege of borrowing it, because we no longer have your husband's excellent credit score to fall back on. Sabrina's new loan comes with an interest rate that's about 3 points higher than what she was paying when I was backing her play. Not enough to bankrupt her, but enough to make her monthly payments feel a lot less comfortable. Enough to make her think twice about those impromptu shopping trips to Nordstrom and those weekend spa retreats that used to appear on our joint credit card statements. The quarterly partner draws at Holt, and Barclays start shrinking too, though that takes a little longer to manifest. See, when you lose 40% of your monthly revenue overnight, you can't just absorb that loss by cutting back on office supplies and cheaper coffee in the break room. You've got to make real adjustments to real budgets, which means real cuts to real paychecks. Kestrel Freight doesn't just redirect their business to Moreno and Shaw. They do it with the kind of efficiency that makes other clients pay attention. When a company that's been loyal to a firm for 3 years suddenly jumps ship, other companies start asking questions. Not hostile questions, just the kind of prudent business questions that smart executives ask when they see patterns they don't understand. Maria Moreno handles the transition like the consummate professional she is. No trash-talking Holt and Barclay, no dramatic announcements about superior service, just quiet competence and the kind of personal attention that reminds clients why they chose to work with someone in the first place. Iron Veil Metals follows Kestrel's lead within a week. Their general counsel, a sharp woman named Janet Harrison, who's been in corporate law longer than I've been alive, calls me personally to discuss the transition. I want you to know, she tells me, that our decision isn't based on any dissatisfaction with the legal work Holt and Barclay provided. They're competent attorneys. But business relationships are built on trust and mutual respect, and when I see how they treated the person who brought us together, it makes me question their judgment in other areas. Janet's a straight shooter who doesn't waste words, so when she says she's questioning their judgment, what she means is that she's wondering what other important relationships they might be taking for granted. Smart executives don't like working with people who can't manage their own internal dynamics. Northstar Bio takes a little longer to make their move, but when they do, it's even more definitive. They don't just redirect their routine legal work. They pull their entire regulatory compliance contract, which represents about 15% of Holt and Barclay's total revenue. Their reasoning is elegantly simple. If the firm can't maintain professional relationships with the people who facilitate their business development, how can they be trusted to maintain the kind of long-term regulatory relationships that keep pharmaceutical companies out of FDA trouble? The document management system situation gets resolved, but not without some expensive lessons learned. Nexus Legal Systems flips the system back to full functionality after Holt, and Barclay pays not just the outstanding integration fees, but also a late payment penalty that probably costs more than most people's annual salary. Rafi Danish is nothing if not thorough about contract enforcement. Business is business, he tells me when I call to thank him for his professionalism throughout the whole mess. You pay your bills on time, you get full service. You don't pay your bills on time, you get exactly what you pay for. It's not personal, it's just math. The 14th floor event space situation is my personal favorite resolution. Pier 17 Holdings, my little LLC that apparently nobody at Holt and Barclay bothered to investigate when they started using the space, terminates their future event privileges for what the contract very specifically defines as reputational breach inconsistent with the professional standards expected of sublessee events. The termination comes with a surcharge that's exactly 3 times the standard event fee, plus a very polite explanation that future bookings will not be accepted from organizations that demonstrate conduct incompatible with the mutual respect and professional courtesy that this venue seeks to maintain. Lydia Chun, the building manager, handles the whole thing with the kind of bureaucratic precision that would make a Swiss train conductor weep with joy. No drama, no personal animosity, just a thorough application of contractual terms that nobody apparently thought would ever be enforced. The real beauty is that none of this feels like revenge. It just feels like business. The kind of business that happens when you treat contracts like they actually mean something, and when you stop pretending that personal relationships don't matter in professional settings. About 10 days into this new reality, I'm sitting in my kitchen, drinking my morning coffee and reading the business section of the newspaper like a normal human being when my phone rings. Sabrina's name pops up on the caller ID, and for the first time in weeks, I actually consider answering it. I let it go to voicemail, then listen to the message about 20 minutes later. Rowan. Her voice sounds tired in a way I haven't heard since her bar exam prep days. I know you're angry, and I know I screwed up. But this has gone beyond making a point. The firm is hemorrhaging money, the partners are panicking, and I'm spending more on loan payments than I'm bringing home. We can fix this if we just sit down and talk like adults. Please, call me back. I save the message, but don't call back. Not yet. That evening, around 11 p.m., which, let's be honest, has always been Sabrina's preferred time for difficult conversations because she thinks I'm more pliable when I'm tired, she texts me from what I assume is her office, because she's apparently still there at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. We can fix this. Come home. Home. Interesting word choice. The condo that I bought and she redecorated? The place where I pay the mortgage and she decides what art goes on the walls. The space where I've been walking on eggshells for months, trying not to embarrass her with my provincial presence? I look around my current living situation. A furnished apartment in a decent neighborhood that doesn't require me to pretend to be someone I'm not. Clean lines, comfortable furniture, no trophies for achievements I wasn't allowed to celebrate. No stack of bills for other people's business expenses on the kitchen counter. No constant reminders of how much money I've spent supporting dreams that apparently don't include me. It's quiet here. Not the oppressive quiet of being ignored, but the peaceful quiet of not having to justify your existence every time you walk into a room. No, I type back. Just that one word, because sometimes the simplest answers are the most complete ones. For the first time in years, I sleep through the night without waking up at 3 a.m. wondering if I've done enough, given enough, sacrificed enough to earn my place in my own life. The answer, apparently, is that the question was wrong from the beginning. You don't earn your place in your own life. You just live it. And I'm finally ready to start living mine again. 2 days later, I get a call from David Shaw at Moreno & Shaw. They want to talk about bringing me on as a client relations partner, not a lawyer, but the guy who speaks fluent logistics and freight and can translate those languages into courtroom when necessary. We've been watching how you handle business relationships, David tells me, and we like what we see. You understand that trust is built through consistency, not just competence. You know that treating people with respect isn't just good manners, it's good business. We think you'd be a valuable addition to our team. For the first time in months, someone is offering me a position based on what I bring to the table, not asking me to minimize what I bring so someone else can look better. When can we start talking specifics? I ask. The conversation lasts about an hour, and by the end of it, I have a job offer that includes equity participation, input on business development strategy, and a title that actually reflects what I do instead of what I'm not. They value what I bring. They say my name in rooms and mean it. They understand that logistics guy isn't a limitation. It's a specialization that brings real value to legal services. Imagine that. 3 weeks after the gala where I learned I didn't fit the image, I'm sitting in a conference room at Moreno & Shaw, reviewing contracts for client relationships that I'm helping to build instead of relationships that I'm being excluded from. Maria Moreno looks across the table at me and smiles. Welcome to the team, partner. Partner, not in the legal sense. I'm not a lawyer and don't pretend to be one. But in the real sense, the sense that matters. Someone who contributes, who belongs, who gets credit for the work they do and respect for the value they bring. It's amazing how good that word sounds when someone means it. 6 months later, I'm standing by the river at 7 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the water gold while I catch my breath after a 3-mile run. There's something almost poetic about starting your day by moving forward under your own power, choosing your own pace, picking your own route. No meetings to accommodate, no schedules to work around. No need to make myself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Turns out, when you stop spending all your energy managing other people's crises, you have enough left over to take care of yourself. Who would have thought? I've been living in my own space for 6 months now, not the furnished apartment where I crashed after the gala, but a real place that I chose and decorated and pay for without having to justify every purchase to someone who thinks my taste is too provincial for their image. It's a 2-bedroom condo in a neighborhood that's more working professional than aspiring socialite, with a kitchen that's actually designed for cooking instead of looking good in architectural magazines. The second bedroom has become my home office, equipped with the kind of technology setup that would make a logistics nerd weep with joy. Multiple monitors, a printer that actually works when you need it to, and enough desk space to spread out contracts and shipping manifests and client files without having to clear space for someone else's legal briefs. This morning, like every morning for the past 4 months, I'm headed to the offices of Moreno & Shaw, where I hold the title of Senior Partner for Client Relations and Business Development. It's a mouthful of a title that basically means I'm the guy who speaks warehouse and freight dock and C-suite with equal fluency, translating business problems into legal solutions and legal solutions back into business language that real people can understand. Maria Moreno and David Shaw turned out to be exactly what they seemed like during that initial conversation. Smart lawyers who understand that the best legal practice isn't just about knowing the law. It's about understanding the businesses and the people who need legal services. They built their firm on the radical concept that client relationships are partnerships, not transactions, and that the person who brings the client to the table deserves to stay at the table. Revolutionary thinking in the legal world, apparently. My office has a window that overlooks the city instead of a parking garage. My name is on the door in actual letters instead of being conspicuously absent from guest lists. When clients come for meetings, I'm introduced as Rowan Pierce, our senior partner for client relations, instead of Rowan. He's in logistics. Small differences that add up to the difference between belonging and being tolerated. Kestrel Freight has been thriving under Moreno and Shaw's representation. Marta Quintero, their general counsel, sent me a bottle of excellent whiskey last month with a note that said, "Thank you for reminding us that business relationships should be built on mutual respect. Best decision we've made in years." Iron Veil Metals brought us 3 new clients through referrals. Companies that were impressed by the seamless transition and the personalized attention that comes from working with a firm that treats every relationship like it matters. Janet Harrison has become something of an unofficial ambassador for our services, which is the kind of word-of-mouth marketing that money can't buy. Northstar Bio has been our biggest success story. Their regulatory compliance work has expanded into a comprehensive legal partnership that covers everything from FDA submissions to international shipping regulations. Last week, they signed a 5-year exclusive contract that represents more annual revenue than I used to make in 3 years at my old logistics job. The beautiful irony is that I'm doing essentially the same work I was doing before, building relationships, facilitating communication between different worlds, helping businesses solve problems, but now I'm getting credit for it instead of being told to stay in the background while someone else takes the spotlight. David Shaw knocked on my office door yesterday afternoon with a proposal that would have seemed like science fiction 6 months ago. "We're thinking about expanding," he said. "Opening a second office, maybe in Chicago or Atlanta. We want someone to head up business development for the new location. Interested in being trusted with major business decisions, in having my expertise valued instead of dismissed, in being offered opportunities instead of being told I don't fit the image. Yeah. You could say I'm interested." My phone buzzes while I'm reviewing contracts for a new client, a mid-sized manufacturing company that needs help navigating some complex environmental regulations. Text message from an unknown number, but I recognize the area code. It's the same one that Holt and Barclay uses for their main office line. "I'm sorry you felt excluded." Felt. That word sits there on my phone screen like a paper cut that won't heal. Not, "I'm sorry I excluded you," or "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry you felt excluded." Like my perception of being systematically dismissed and diminished was just a misunderstanding, a failure of communication, an overreaction to perfectly reasonable professional boundaries. I stare at the message for about 30 seconds, then archive it without responding. Some conversations aren't worth having, especially when the other person is still trying to rewrite history instead of acknowledging it. The thing about feeling excluded is that it requires someone to actively do the excluding. Feelings don't exist in a vacuum. They're responses to actions, to patterns, to the accumulation of small moments that add up to big truths. When someone consistently treats you like you don't belong, eventually you feel like you don't belong. Funny how that works. But here's what I've learned over the past 6 months. The best revenge isn't grand gestures or dramatic confrontations or public humiliation. The best revenge is building a life where you don't need to be on anyone's list to belong. I delete the text and get back to work. Real work. Work that matters. Work that gets recognized and valued and compensated appropriately. Work that doesn't require me to make myself invisible so someone else can shine brighter. Maria stops by my office around lunchtime with updates on 3 potential new clients and a grin that tells me she's got good news to share. Remember that pharmaceutical logistics company that contacted us last month? They want to move forward with a comprehensive legal partnership. Regulatory compliance, shipping contracts, international trade law, the whole package. They specifically asked for you to be their primary point of contact. Why me specifically? Because, and I quote, Rowan Pierce is the only person we've met who understands both the legal side and the business side of what we do. He doesn't just give us legal advice. He gives us business solutions that happen to involve legal advice. Business solutions that happen to involve legal advice. I like that description a lot better than provincial or not partner material. That afternoon, I have lunch with Celine Park, my oldest friend, my attorney, and the person who saw this train wreck coming from about 5 miles away. We meet at a bistro downtown that specializes in the kind of food that tastes good instead of the kind that photographs well for social media. You look different, she says after we order. Lighter somehow. Like you've been carrying around a weight for so long you forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. I feel different. More like myself, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense. You spent 5 years trying to be the kind of person who deserved to be included in someone else's vision of success. Now you're just being the kind of person who creates your own success. Celine's always been good at cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of things. It's what makes her an excellent attorney and an even better friend. Any regrets? She asks. I think about it for a minute, really think about it. Do I regret the 5 years of supporting Sabrina's career? The money I spent, the connections I made, the effort I put into building something that I thought we were building together? No. I say finally. I regret how it ended, but I don't regret what I did. I believed in someone I loved, and I acted on that belief. The fact that she didn't value what I brought to the table doesn't mean I was wrong to bring it. And now I'm working with people who do value what I bring to the table. It's amazing how much easier life gets when you stop trying to convince people to appreciate you and start working with people who already do. We spend the rest of lunch talking about her cases, my new clients, and the general absurdity of people who think that professional success gives them license to treat others poorly. It's the kind of conversation you can only have with someone who's known you long enough to remember who you were before you started doubting yourself. That evening, I'm back in my condo, cooking dinner for one and actually enjoying the process instead of seeing it as a chore to get through before the next crisis demands my attention. I've got music playing, a glass of wine breathing on the counter, and a salmon fillet that's going to be perfectly prepared because I can take my time with it. My phone rings around 8 p.m. Sabrina's name pops up on the caller ID for the first time in about 2 months. I consider letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity gets the better of me. Hello, Sabrina. Rowan. Her voice sounds different, less commanding, more uncertain. How are you? I'm well. How are you? I'm managing. The firm is stabilizing. We've brought in some new clients to replace the ones we lost. Things are getting back to normal. Normal. Interesting word choice for a situation that involved losing nearly half their revenue and having to restructure multiple financial arrangements. I'm glad to hear it. There's a pause, the kind of pause that happens when someone is trying to figure out how to say something they don't really want to say. I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to be treated like a partner instead of a problem. I think maybe I lost sight of how much you contributed. How much you still contribute. Contributed. Past tense. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Another pause. Longer this time. I miss you, she says finally. I miss us. I miss having someone who understands the business side of what I do. Someone who can translate between my world and the real world. Someone who can translate between my world and the real world. Not someone she loves, not someone she respects, not someone she wants to build a life with. Someone who can perform a useful function in her professional ecosystem. I understand. I tell her and I mean it. But I'm not a translator, Sabrina. I'm not a bridge between your world and the real world. I live in the real world, and I've found people who value that instead of seeing it as something that needs to be managed or hidden or apologized for. We could try again. We could do it differently this time. We could, but I don't want to. The words come out easier than I expected, without anger or bitterness or the need to explain or justify. Just a simple statement of fact. I don't want to go back to being smaller than I am so someone else can feel bigger than they are. I hope you find what you're looking for, I tell her. I hope you build the kind of life that makes you happy. I just won't be part of it anymore. After I hang up, I finish cooking my dinner, pour myself another glass of wine, and sit down at my kitchen table with a book I've been meaning to read for months. Not a business book or a self-help guide or something designed to make me more useful to other people. Just a novel that looked interesting when I walked past the bookstore last week. It's good to have time to read novels again. It's good to have evenings that belong to me instead of to someone else's emergency. It's good to live in a space where I don't have to justify my presence or apologize for taking up room. I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires energy that I'd rather spend on building things than tearing them down. I'm not bitter, because bitterness is just disappointment that's been allowed to ferment, and I'm not disappointed anymore. I'm just free. Free to be exactly who I am, exactly where I am, exactly when I want to be there. And for the first time in years, that feels like enough. It was already past midnight when I got home. My hands were stiff from the cold and the cheap hospital gloves. My shoulders sore from leaning over an elderly patient for nearly an hour to help her breathe. I work long shifts in the ER, and that night, like most, I had skipped lunch and ran on burnt coffee and adrenaline. Still, as I stepped through the door of our small apartment, I felt that tiny flicker of warmth in my chest, because Christmas was coming. The lights I'd hung last week still blinked softly across the living room wall. They weren't much, just a $10 set from a corner store, but they gave the room a heartbeat. My tired eyes drifted to the bag by the front door. It was packed already. I'd wrapped the gifts the night before, neatly, with gold ribbon like Patricia always liked. There was a red wine bottle too, and a large container of spiced rice, the kind they all raved about every year, but somehow never seemed to remember I made. They always assumed it came from some catering service. I never corrected them. I had just slipped out of my shoes when my phone rang. I didn't even check the screen. I knew the voice on the other end before it said a word. Harper, my wife's younger sister. Always well-groomed, always poised, always dripping in curated charm. She was the kind of person who said darling with a straight face and could spend 30 minutes describing the aesthetic of a butter knife. Hi, she said, her voice syrupy. I just wanted to check in before tomorrow. I thought she was going to ask me to pick up something last minute for the party, maybe gingerbread cookies or a spare tablecloth. I braced myself for it. But instead, she said, gently, don't come for Christmas. Just like that. At first, I thought she was joking. Sorry. She hesitated, then repeated it, softer this time. Don't come. It's just, we're trying to make a certain impression this year. Still standing by the doorway, I didn't know how to respond. I blinked at the blinking lights, suddenly too bright. Impression? You know, Grayson will be there. My boyfriend. I've mentioned him. Right. The billionaire. The tech investor who made his first million at 19 and now bought wine that cost more than my rent. I remembered. We just want things to feel elevated, she added, like I was some scratch on a polished surface. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't come out raw. But then another voice came through the speaker. Patricia. My mother-in-law. She didn't even wait for introductions. We'll just pretend we don't know you if you show up, she said plainly, like she was reading a grocery list. I heard Harper gasp slightly, maybe caught off guard by how blunt her mother had been. But no one corrected her. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. So you're saying I'm not invited? There was a pause. Then Harper said, it's just one dinner. Maybe next year. I didn't respond. I ended the call and stood there in silence. The room was too quiet, too hollow, like the sound had been sucked out. I walked over to the tree, barely 5 feet tall and missing half the ornaments, but it was ours. I looked at the bag again. The gifts, the wine, the rice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something crack under my ribs. Not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. I sat down slowly on the couch and stared at the lights. Red, blue, green, yellow. Each one blinking like a heartbeat I no longer felt. What struck me wasn't the exclusion. I've never been the favorite. I've been called too quiet, too boring, just a nurse, even though I'd worked 3 jobs to put my wife through law school. What struck me was how easy it was for them to cut me out. How comfortable they were pretending I didn't belong. I remember a time, years ago, when Patricia cried to me on the phone because their mortgage was 2 months behind. I dipped into my savings and covered it without hesitation. Harper? She'd totaled her car in college, and I was the only one who co-signed for her new one when her credit was tanked. These people knew I would show up. I always did. Until now. The spiced rice started to feel cold in its container. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the silence settle in. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about the billionaire. It wasn't even about Christmas. It was about control. They never saw me as part of them. I was convenient. A placeholder. A man-shaped coat rack. I didn't match their world, so they decided to edit me out. But here's the thing about quiet men. We don't make a scene. We just wait. We let the silence do the talking. And sometimes, silence is the loudest sound in the room. I reached over, turned off the blinking lights, and let the darkness settle. That night, I didn't go online. Didn't call anyone. Didn't explain. I didn't even tell my wife, who was already staying with them to help prep for the holiday. Let them have their performance. Let them polish the silverware and rehearse their accents. Let them tell their stories to a man with $1 billion. Because me? I had something they didn't know how to measure. Value that didn't need to be seen to be real. And they were about to find out what it meant to erase the man who held everything together, not by rage, not by revenge, but by simply walking away. That was the night I decided I wouldn't fight for a seat at their table. I'd build my own, and leave theirs, perfectly empty. There's something oddly freeing about being unwanted. It's not instant. It creeps in, like the cold when you stand outside too long. First, you feel nothing. Then you start to shiver. Eventually, you realize your body is gone numb, and you just stop caring. That's what the morning felt like after that call. I didn't call my wife. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't send angry texts or question how her family, people I'd helped, fed, carried, could be so dismissive. I already knew the answer. It was never about who I was. It was about who I wasn't. I wasn't rich. I wasn't charming in that dinner party kind of way. I didn't wear cologne with unpronounceable names or network with venture capitalists. I worked long nights in a trauma ward. I came home smelling like antiseptic. My back hurt. My hands were calloused. I was real. And real didn't fit their fantasy. They wanted polish. A curated aesthetic. And I was too textured. I sat on the edge of the bed that morning and looked around at the apartment I'd worked so hard to build with her. The same apartment where her family had celebrated birthdays and baby showers, wine nights and New Year's toasts. They took photos here, laughed here, ate meals cooked by my hands in the kitchen she never used. I paid most of the rent. They never noticed. That was the thing about her family, they never noticed. When Harper couldn't get approved for her car, I didn't hesitate. I signed the forms, paid the fees, and even covered her first 3 insurance payments. She called me a lifesaver back then. But lifesavers get used and tossed once the boat is steady again. And when Patricia called me crying about the house, her voice shaking, her pride barely intact, I didn't even flinch. I drove across the city in the pouring rain, walked into that bank with soaked shoes, and negotiated with the manager for a deferment. Then I wired them $12,000 the next morning. That payment kept them afloat. That payment kept their Christmas lights on. The same ones I wouldn't get to see this year. Funny how that works. They remembered the wine I brought, but never who brought it. They remembered the rice dish, but never who cooked it. They remembered the warmth, the help, the presence, but never the person. But I remembered everything. I remembered how Patricia once told her friend at brunch, he's sweet, simple, very steady, like I was a table leg, functional, not worth admiration, just there to keep things from falling. I remembered the way Harper would lean into my wife and whisper about how I still wore the same black coat from last year, as if owning the same winter coat 2 years in a row was a crime. I remembered when her father once called me noble in a tragic kind of way, like I was a stray dog he might pity but never adopt. All those comments I let slide. All the disrespect I folded into quiet smiles. Because I believed family meant overlooking flaws. I believed love could make you patient. And I believed that, over time, people would see the truth behind the quiet man. But I was wrong. Some people don't see you because they don't want to. You don't fit the picture they painted, so they crop you out like background noise. I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out the old black folder I kept tucked behind some medical journals. Inside it were documents, lots of them. Bank records, wire transfers, co-signed agreements, ownership papers. You see, while they were busy ignoring me, they forgot I was the one who handled the back end. Patricia's house, that mortgage they saved face on. I was listed on the emergency relief fund that was linked to her name. The bank had my contact details, not hers. Harper's boutique, that angel investor she boasted about at her last launch party, that was me. I created an alias, B. Trenton Investments, just to keep her pride intact. Her store lease was in my name. their family savings account, that emergency pot they liked to brag about in case of a rainy day. That fund had been steadily growing under my management for 4 years. I was the sole manager. They never asked. I never offered. But the truth was, they didn't want to know. They just liked the idea that good things magically appeared when they snapped their fingers. And for a long time, I let them live that illusion. Maybe because I thought being useful was enough. But being useful isn't the same as being valued. That morning, I brewed myself a cup of coffee and watched the sun rise through the window. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt clarity. They didn't want me? Fine. Then they didn't get the version of me that held them up anymore. I logged into the bank account first. The emergency fund, frozen. The boutique's rent payments, canceled. Let Harper deal with the landlord for once. Then the house note, Patricia's precious retirement nest. I removed my secondary authorization. Let her field the next bank call. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a text. I didn't even log out of the system. I just stopped. Stopped carrying them. Stopped lifting them. Stopped being the backbone they pretended didn't exist. And it felt good. Not out of spite, but out of balance. They had spent years shaping an image, playing house with luxury, and pretending it was all organic, homegrown success. But underneath the surface, it was me holding up the foundation. Me, the man they never wanted. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. But I was quiet because I was calculating. Because when quiet men move, the world doesn't notice until it falls. That day, I went for a walk. No phone, no destination. Just air in my lungs and freedom in my steps. I watched children play in the snow, couples rushing with gifts, strangers helping each other carry boxes to cars. It all felt honest. And I realized, with every step I took away from that world they created, I was getting closer to something more real. More mine. They didn't want me at Christmas? Then they wouldn't get the man who paid for the candles, the food, the heat, and the peace. Let them perform. Let them sparkle. I'd given them a stage for years. Now I was taking the lights with me. The silence didn't echo, it settled. Like snow on rooftops, thick and final. And for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for Patricia's sharp remarks at the dinner table or Harper's side eyes when I passed the wine. I wasn't preparing my face to smile through another cold joke or filtering my words to avoid being called too intense. I wasn't shrinking. I was, still, present. Just for myself. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. It buzzed, not with anger, but decisions. Clean, cold, deliberate ones. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming beside me, a yellow legal pad open in front of me. I began making a list. Not of people, not of names. Just actions. Quiet exits. Calculated departures. Every line I wrote was a string I'd been holding that now needed letting go. Mortgage top-up, canceled. It was the first thing I did. Patricia's home, the big white one with the stone pillars she always bragged about, was kept afloat by two things, her loud pride and my quiet monthly deposits. They thought it was their own frugality. No, it was me. Every time she found an extra $1,000, it was because I had silently deposited it into the joint account I opened in their name under a small LLC, Cypress Renewal. Sounds like a spa brand, right? They never asked what it was. Never cared to know. So I quietly ended it. Family emergency account. Locked. They never once thanked me for it, but they sure loved bragging about it. My wife used to call it our legacy fund whenever guests were around. The reality? I opened it when Patricia's health started to decline and no one else wanted to think long-term. I built it up slowly, redirecting part of my night shift bonuses, never touching it, not even once. That morning, I logged into the platform, changed the email access, and locked withdrawals behind two-factor authentication. No warning. No explanation. Just done. Harper's Boutique's angel investor exited. That one stung a little. Not because I wanted credit, but because I believed in her. When she stood in my living room 3 years ago, crying about her failed Kickstarter campaign, I didn't hesitate. I created a shell investment firm, backed it with my savings, and sent the wire transfer under the name Brinfield Holdings. It was enough to get her out of debt and open the boutique in Midtown. Everyone praised her. Harper's so resilient. She's a genius. Not once did she mention who helped. When I ended that funding, I didn't tell her. I just instructed the firm's proxy to decline the next round. Then I called the leasing office. Told them Brinfield Holdings would no longer be guaranteeing her rent. That was all. No rage. No bitterness. Because when a tree withdraws its roots, it doesn't scream. It just stops growing. And the leaves fall. I didn't unfollow anyone. I didn't delete photos or block numbers. I just became invisible, quiet, in a way they'd never noticed before. Only this time, it wasn't submission. It was subtraction. Every relationship is a system. And for years, I was the invisible backbone, never flashy, never loud, but always there. Holding, balancing, absorbing tension. I didn't ask to be thanked. I didn't want applause. I just wanted respect. But when Harper said, "Don't come for Christmas," and Patricia threatened to pretend I didn't exist, well, I simply gave them what they asked for. My absence. And absence, when it's the thing holding the beams together, isn't silence. It's collapse. I remember walking to the window that afternoon, looking down at the snow-covered sidewalk below. A young boy was helping his little sister make snow angels on the edge of the pavement. They giggled, their jackets puffed out like little balloons. And I wondered, just for a second, what kind of man I might have been if I hadn't been pulled into the orbit of people who only valued shine. What kind of peace I could have had if I hadn't spent the last decade earning the approval of people who thought approval was a currency. I closed the curtain, poured another cup of coffee, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a new budget. For me. No hidden accounts for emergencies they'd never thank me for. No side funds to save someone else's pride. Just one account. One card. One man. Then I made a phone call. "Andre," I said, when the young voice answered. "You still looking for a second internship?" It took him a second to place me. "Mr. R." "Yeah." "Oh man, I didn't think you'd call. I sent that message months ago. I've got something for you," I said. "It's not glamorous. It's hands-on. But it's real. And you'll learn." He hesitated. "You sure?" "I'm very sure." Because Andre? He was different. He was hungry, humble, and kind. I had met him 2 years ago through a mentoring program. Quiet kid, always carrying an old laptop and fixing things he couldn't afford to replace. He reminded me of me. That call wasn't just about an internship. It was about investment into someone who'd never erase me when things got good. After the call, I leaned back and took a breath. The apartment felt warmer. Not because anything had changed physically, but because something had shifted inside me. A detachment. A letting go of the people who treated me like scaffolding and expected me to disappear once the building looked pretty. Let them keep their polished lies. Let them toast champagne with Grayson and pretend their lives weren't built on the quiet strength of the man they threw away. I didn't need them to know. I just needed me to remember. And I would. Because every gift I'd ever given them, every dollar, every sacrifice, every moment of peace bought with my silence, they would miss it. Not immediately. Not today. But when the pipes froze. When the boutique's landlord came knocking. When Patricia's insurance bounced. When the cracks began to show behind their curated smiles. They'd look around and realize the one man they erased was the one keeping them from falling apart. I didn't expect the quiet to feel this good. Christmas Eve rolled in like a storm wrapped in velvet, quiet, cold, and slow. I stayed in bed later than usual, not because I was tired, but because I could. No obligations. No expectations. No in-laws peeking into the oven or Harper fake smiling while complaining about the centerpiece. It was the first time in years that I wasn't running around trying to make other people's holiday feel whole. I made coffee, black, strong, and let it fill the room with the smell of something real. No cinnamon candles. No expensive scented diffusers. Just coffee and silence. My phone had been silent for 2 days. No text from my wife. No updates from Harper. Not even a sarcastic Merry Christmas from Patricia. They were preparing, no doubt. Prepping for the evening like it was a Broadway show. Harper had been planning this night for weeks. She called it the big reveal the moment she would introduce Grayson Ellison to the family. The billionaire tech mogul. The man who could put her name next to magazine headlines and six-figure wedding fantasies. They wanted everything perfect. Spotless. Patricia probably had her pearls on before breakfast. Harper would have had her makeup artist arrive by noon. I could picture it clearly. Candles lit just right, fireplace roaring even though the heating worked perfectly, violinist by the archway. They'd hired a jazz quartet. I knew because I'd helped them once with the deposit on that quartet, back when it was for someone else's wedding that ended in 3 months. But this year, no one needed me. Or rather, they didn't want me. And so I stayed home. I didn't even turn on the tree lights. They hadn't called to ask why I wasn't coming, which told me they didn't think I'd say no. They believed I'd beg, that I'd press and plead and ask to be let back in, that maybe I'd send a gift anyway, or drop off something sweet for the table, just to show I was still the good guy. But they didn't understand the kind of man I am. I don't need to shout. I just need to stop. And stopping is what I did. I walked past the blinking gifts I had wrapped weeks ago. Still there. Still untouched. A quiet graveyard of effort wasted on people who never said thank you. I didn't scroll through social media, though I knew the posts would be coming in. Harper had likely hired a photographer to capture the evening. She once told me that Christmas wasn't about memories, it was about content. She meant it. Perfect angles. Perfect filters. They didn't just want to impress Grayson, they wanted to curate him. And I didn't fit into the feed. I was too ordinary. Too useful in ways that didn't photograph well. No one posts about the man who fixes the boiler at midnight. The one who pays the light bill quietly or drives you to the airport at 5 a.m. when your ride cancels. I wasn't sleek. I wasn't exciting. I wasn't an aesthetic. I was a foundation. And foundations aren't supposed to be seen. But I was fine with that now. That evening, as the sky turned to indigo and the chill crept through the windows, I cooked a simple dinner for myself. Nothing fancy. Just what I liked. I didn't think once about whether it was enough for someone else. I poured myself a glass of wine. The same one I'd brought for their party. A bottle Patricia once scoffed at for being underwhelming. She liked wine that came with French names and gold foil. Me? I liked wine that tasted like patience. And as I took the first sip, I imagined the performance starting. I could see them in my mind, Harper at the entrance, dressed in something expensive and understated, pretending to be surprised each time a guest complimented her. Patricia offering her signature sugar cookies, the one she bought but always claimed she baked. The fireplace roaring. The lights dimmed to a golden hue. Grayson would arrive last, of course. That's how they timed it. Big entrance. Big moment. They would swarm him. Shake hands. Compliment his shoes. Talk about stocks they didn't understand and brands they couldn't afford. My wife would probably be standing near the piano, pretending to enjoy the music while glancing sideways to check Harper's approval. It was all a performance. And I used to be part of it. Unpaid crew backstage, working lights and lifting scenes while they took their bows. This year, they decided I wasn't needed. So I didn't show up. And somehow, that made me feel bigger, not smaller. I was done being their silent supporting actor. Let them have their spotlight. Let them glitter and glow. But without the man who used to iron their tablecloths at midnight. Without the man who quietly paid the caterer when the card got declined. Without the man who refilled the wine glasses while everyone else told stories they didn't live. They had erased me. Now they would perform without the glue that held their act together. And something deep down told me they'd feel it. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not when the cameras were clicking and the flutes were full. But eventually, when the bills came, when the smiles faded, when the real work had to be done and no one remembered how to lift the weight I always carried. I didn't text my wife. Didn't ask how the evening went. Didn't care if they missed me. Because for the first time, I had no need to be part of something that cost me my peace. I sat back in my chair and looked at the small tree in the corner. Still bare. Still standing. And I smiled. Let the performance begin. Because when the curtains fall, they'll know who was missing. The day after Christmas, the world outside was still wrapped in white. Snow clung to the rooftops, and the streets wore a silence that only winter could deliver. No carols, no laughter, just stillness. It matched my mood perfectly. I hadn't checked my phone since Christmas Eve. Whatever performances they'd staged, I didn't care to watch. My peace, though quiet, was enough. But sometime around noon, my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. A third time. At first, I ignored it. I was halfway through organizing old books, ones I'd promised myself I'd reread when life slowed down. And now it had. But the name that lit up the screen when I finally glanced at it stopped me mid-page. Grayson Ellison. I stared at the name for a full minute, unsure if I was seeing it right. We'd never spoken directly before. He was Harper's prized boyfriend, the one they'd polished the house for, adjusted their personalities for. The man they chose over me. The voicemail icon blinked. I played it. His voice came through, calm but with something beneath it. Thoughtfulness, maybe. Or realization. Hey, man. I know this is unexpected. I didn't get your number from Harper. Andre gave it to me. Said you were his mentor. That alone hit me like a slow breath in cold air. Andre. The quiet kid with the second-hand laptop I'd helped get into a summer tech program. I didn't know they were connected. Grayson continued. I saw your photo at the party. In the hallway. Family portrait stuff. I recognized you instantly. You're the guy who mentored my little cousin through that Harlem program, right? The one who paid his tuition and never took credit. I sat down slowly. My knees felt unsteady. He knew. Yeah, he said, you're that guy. The one who didn't make a scene. Who showed up when it mattered. Who stayed invisible while everyone else soaked up the light. His voice paused, like he was still processing it. So imagine my surprise, he went on, when I heard Harper and Patricia joking about you. Calling you deadweight. A charity case in a suit. Laughing. In front of me. A chill crawled over my skin. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Not anymore. The cruelty wasn't new. The audience was. Grayson's tone hardened just slightly. I left the party. A breath passed through the recording, then a final note. I left her. I don't tolerate cruelty wrapped in Christmas bows. Click. That was it. That was the whole message. Barely a minute long. But it changed everything. I sat there for a while, staring at the phone like it might say more. Like maybe another message would come through with some alternate ending. But there was nothing else. Just the raw truth of what had happened. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, then leaned against the counter as the weight of it all began to settle. He'd seen a photo. Of me. Of all the things they tried to hide, erase, and rewrite, what shattered their illusion wasn't some dramatic confrontation or viral post. It was a photo. I remembered that photo clearly. It wasn't posed. Just a candid shot from 3 years ago. We were in my backyard, celebrating my wife's graduation. I had grilled for 6 hours while everyone else drank mimosas and took photos. At one point, my niece had grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of me handing a plate to Patricia, laughing about something small and silly. My arm was around Harper's shoulder. Everyone looked happy. It had somehow ended up framed in the hallway at Patricia's house, probably out of convenience or because the lighting looked good. They never thought twice about it. Never considered that the man in the corner of their curated wall might one day cost them their perfect show. And yet, that's exactly what happened. The man they pretended not to know turned out to be the reason their guest of honor walked out the door. I didn't feel triumph. No smug smile crept across my face. What I felt was something deeper, like justice without sound, like a weight finally sliding off my shoulders. They tried to shine by dimming me, but you can't hide a steady light, not forever. Not when it's real. I sat back down and opened my email. Not to write anything, just to stare at the inbox. I knew what would come next. The scrambling. The justifications. The damage control. And sure enough, by evening, the first message came. From Patricia. Subject line. Let's talk. No greeting. No apology. Just a line. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Harper is devastated. Can you help us fix this with Grayson? He respects you. He listens to you. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because silence, I've learned, makes people reflect harder than any reply. An hour later, Harper messaged. This time, it was longer. I know things have been weird, and I'm sorry if we made you feel left out. That wasn't the intention. Can we please talk? I think you could help clarify some things with Grayson. Clarify? They wanted me to translate my worth. As if now that it mattered to someone important, it needed to be defined. I put my phone down. I didn't need to respond. My photo had already spoken for me. That night, I lit the tree. Not for Christmas, but for myself. The lights flickered gently, casting soft colors across the walls. I sat beneath it, glass of wine in hand, and felt more peace than I'd known in years. Because sometimes, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to let the truth sit in a frame long enough for the right person to see it. They tried to erase me. But they forgot. Real character leaves shadows. And shadows show up in photographs. It started with a knock. Not loud. Not urgent. But persistent. The kind of knock that's too rehearsed to sound casual. I was at my desk, organizing some invoices for a clinic in Queens, sipping lukewarm coffee, when I heard it. A slow rhythm. 3 short taps, followed by silence. I didn't need to check the peephole to know who it was. I already felt the shift in the air. I opened the door. There she was. Patricia. Wearing oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy, clutching a handbag so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Behind her, a black car idled at the curb, engine humming like it was impatient too. And in the front seat, Harper. Looking anywhere but at me. Her face was pale, but her posture screamed tension, arms folded, eyes locked on a street lamp like it had answers. Patricia tried to smile. It was the kind of smile people give when they're about to ask for something they don't think they deserve. May we come in? She asked, her voice strained and brittle. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I just stood in the doorway, waiting. She cleared her throat. This isn't easy to say, but we need to talk. About Grayson. Of course they did. Now I was useful again. I didn't reply. Just raised an eyebrow and waited. Patricia took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes puffy from what I assumed were either tears or a sleepless night. Harper hasn't slept since Christmas, she said. Grayson blocked her number. Won't return her calls. And her reputation. I said nothing. Because what do you say to people who ignored your presence until it became inconvenient? She continued, as if talking faster would fill the silence I kept giving her. You know he respects you, she said, a little too eagerly now. He mentioned how highly he thinks of you. How you've mentored Andre. How generous you've been. We, Harper especially, had no idea how close you were. I tilted my head slightly. Close? I finally said. Her lips faltered. Well, not close, maybe. But he clearly values you. There it was. Values you. Suddenly, I mattered again. Not because I was family. Not because I was a human being. But because he valued me. And now they were scrambling to borrow that value like a flashlight during a blackout. She stepped closer. If you could just talk to him. Explain that what he overheard was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean any harm. It was a joke. A bad one. She gave a little laugh, sharp and nervous. The kind people make when they're trying to convince themselves, too. Behind her, Harper finally opened the car door. She stepped out slowly, clutching her coat tight around her. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, in the smallest voice I'd ever heard her use, she said, We messed up. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the confident woman who used to strut through the house with expensive perfume trailing behind her. I didn't see the smug sister-in-law who once told a family friend I was just a floor nurse, as if that disqualified me from love. I saw someone afraid. Not of me, but of the collapse. Of the illusion they'd built for themselves now catching fire. Patricia kept pushing. Grayson is high profile. People follow his lead. He made one vague post online, and now Harper's lost 2 endorsements. One of her distributors backed out. We need this fixed. There was that word again. They didn't come to apologize. They came to clean up. I exhaled slowly. You called me dead weight, I said quietly. Harper flinched. You said I was a charity case in a suit. Patricia opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. You didn't expect the man in the photo to matter. You didn't even remember the photo was there. Silence. Just the engine humming in the background and the faint sound of wind brushing the trees. Patricia stepped forward again. You've always been good at calming people down. Maybe if you could talk to Grayson, just once, he'd see that we didn't mean anything by it. I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. They didn't get it. They still thought this was about a fix, a patch, a reset. But this wasn't something that could be undone. This wasn't about a single moment. It was about years. Years of being overlooked. Years of showing up, giving quietly, and being made to feel like a shadow at their table. And now they were here, begging for the light they'd once tried to dim. You're not here because you're sorry, I said. You're here because the mask cracked. Patricia's face tightened. Harper stepped forward. I am sorry, she said, voice breaking. I wasn't thinking. We were stupid. We were cruel. But Grayson is everything to me. And you're the reason he walked away. I nodded slowly. For once, the truth felt clean. You're right, I said. I am. She stared at me, like she didn't know what to do with that honesty. So you'll talk to him? Patricia asked, hopeful again. I smiled. Not cruelly. Not smugly. Just peacefully. No, I said. And I stepped back. Then closed the door. Gently. Deliberately. Behind it, the quiet returned. I leaned against it for a second, listening to the stunned silence outside. I could imagine Patricia blinking, Harper frozen mid-step, trying to decide whether to knock again or just walk away. They didn't knock. After a few seconds, I heard the car door close. Then the engine faded down the street. Gone. I walked back to the kitchen, sat down, picked up my mug again. Still warm. I took a sip and smiled to myself. This was what accountability looked like, not shouted in arguments or posted online, but felt in the echo after silence. They'd never heard it before, never learned how powerful stillness could be when it carried truth. And now, they were learning. Not through fury, not through revenge, but through absence. I didn't need to lift a hand to destroy them. All I had to do was stop helping them hold up the lie. And now? Now the cracks were showing. I didn't check social media often, but something told me to open the app that morning. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was just the quiet thrill of wondering what happens when people realize the mask they wore so proudly is beginning to slip. The first thing I saw was a post. It wasn't from Harper. It wasn't from Patricia. It was from Grayson. Just a single sentence. No tags, no images, no names. Watch how people treat the ones they think can't give them anything. It tells you everything. That was it. Simple. Elegant. Devastating. No one was mentioned. But everyone in their orbit knew who it was about. Harper's comment section turned off by noon. One of her old sponsors, a luxury home decor brand, issued a vague statement about reevaluating partnerships in light of recent values misalignment. Her boutique's Instagram went from 3 posts a day to total silence. The ripple had begun, and I didn't lift a finger. Grayson didn't say my name. He didn't need to. He just told the truth, his truth. What he saw, what he heard. And the truth had a way of echoing in rooms people thought were soundproof. That single sentence hit harder than any public fallout they feared. Because it didn't attack, it revealed. And nothing scares people more than being seen without their performance. Later that day, I got a message from Andre. Yo, you see Grayson's post? I think he's talking about what happened at the party. People are going wild in the comments. I smiled and typed back. He said what needed to be said. You good. Never better. Because the truth is, I wasn't shaken. I wasn't even surprised. I was still. Solid. Like a tree whose roots had finally stopped feeding ungrateful branches. I went back to my routine that week. Brewed my coffee. Finished the clinic invoices. Walked to the park one afternoon just to feel the winter sun on my face. Life didn't feel heavy anymore. Not because it got easier, but because I had stopped carrying what wasn't mine to hold. That Friday, I got a call from a colleague at the hospital. Hey, she said, trying to sound casual. You might want to know. Harper's father called HR. I paused. He called HR? Why? He said he was concerned about your mental health. Something about emotional instability and asking if we'd noticed any erratic behavior. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course, when they can't control the story, they try to rewrite the ending. My voice was calm. Did HR buy it? She laughed. No. We know you. And frankly, we've all seen the party photos. What party photos? The ones Patricia posted. Grayson's in none of them. People noticed. Word gets around. You're not the one looking unstable. I hung up the call and just sat there for a moment. It had begun. Not a scandal. Not a meltdown. But a reckoning. The kind that doesn't come with headlines, but with silence. The kind that empties rooms at networking events and drops email responses from hours to never. People in their world started stepping back, not loudly, but visibly. Because in circles like theirs, image isn't just everything, it's currency. And when someone like Grayson quietly signals that you're not worth being around, the world listens. I didn't gloat. I didn't text Harper. I didn't tell my wife, wherever she was, that I knew what they were going through. Instead, I lit a candle that evening, opened an old notebook I hadn't touched in months, and began to write again. Just thoughts. Reflections. Not about them. About me. Because something had shifted deep inside me since that night they told me not to come. Something I hadn't expected. I began to remember myself. Not the version I trimmed down to be palatable at dinner tables. Not the quiet shadow at family gatherings. Not the helpful hand that never got mentioned in toasts. But the man I used to be. The one who dreamed without needing permission. The one who gave because it was who he was, not because he was trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. That man had gone quiet for a long time. Now he was waking up. The truth wasn't just echoing out there, it was echoing in here, inside me. And as it did, I realized something else. I had always been the one with power. Not because I had money, not because I had influence, but because I showed up over and over, and they depended on that. They built their world on the assumption that I'd never stop giving. But when I stopped, the whole illusion wobbled. And now? Now they weren't just facing public whispers and dropped sponsors. They were facing themselves. That weekend, I ran into an old friend at the bookstore. Someone who used to be in Patricia's circle. She leaned in and said, I heard what happened. Just wanted you to know, people are starting to talk. But not in a bad way. I thanked her. We exchanged numbers again. And as I walked home through the crisp December air, something warmed in my chest. It wasn't pride. It was peace. Because sometimes, the storm doesn't need thunder. Sometimes, it's a quiet shift in wind. And everyone feels it, even if no one talks about it. It came on a Wednesday morning. An email with no subject line. Just my name in the first sentence, like we were old friends catching up after a misunderstanding. We've been thinking, maybe we could meet for brunch this Sunday? No apology. No ownership. Just suggestion. As if the last few weeks hadn't happened. As if they hadn't thrown me out of their picture and now wanted to paste me back in because the new frame was falling apart. I scrolled down. They didn't even try to pretend it was about rebuilding a relationship. Halfway through the message, Harper wrote, "It would also mean a lot if you could speak to Grayson. Maybe ask him to take down that post? It's hurting more than just our image. It's affecting people's jobs. Their image. Their jobs. Not a word about the years I'd carried them on my back. Not a line about the sacrifices I'd made. Just concern over the fallout. And that was the problem. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted a reset. As if this was a video game they could restart once the screen glitched. As if I didn't remember every moment they dismissed me. Every time they handed me their coats and their complaints, while smiling at the people they really wanted to impress. I closed the email without responding. And a strange thing happened. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel insulted. I felt free. Because the version of me that would have rushed to keep the peace, that would have agreed to the brunch and played mediator again, that version was gone. Buried beneath the silence they forced on me. And in its place stood someone quieter, clearer, untouchable. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. But when it came again, same number, I answered. It was my father-in-law. The man who once told me, with a smirk and a drink in his hand, "You're not what I expected her to marry, but I guess stability has its perks." He cleared his throat before speaking, like he wasn't used to asking for things. "I think there's been enough drama," he said. "We're all adults here. Maybe it's time to move on." I didn't speak. He went on. "Patricia's having trouble sleeping. Harper's a wreck. Your wife's, well, she's confused. She misses you." I stared at the window, watching a few birds hop along the frost-covered ledge. "I think what we need," he said, "is to just clear the air. One conversation. Get everyone on the same page." I finally spoke. "Which page is that?" He paused. "You know what I mean." But I didn't. Not really. Because the page they were on was never the one I was allowed to write. I said, "Did you know Patricia called my workplace? Tried to get HR to flag me as emotionally unstable?" A beat of silence. Then, defensively, she was just worried. The media thing caught us off guard. You know how she gets when she panics. "Must be hard," I said, voice steady, "when the spotlight hits the wrong person." He didn't reply. I ended the call with a simple, "I'm not interested." Then I turned my phone off for the night. The next morning, they escalated. An email went out to the entire extended family. A message crafted like a PR campaign, disguised as family concern. My name in it, carefully framed. "We're worried about him. He hasn't responded. We think he might be isolating. The holidays are hard. Let's keep him in our prayers." Prayers. From people who told me not to come. Who called me dead weight. Who only remembered I existed when someone they wanted was watching me. They wanted to control the narrative. Turn my silence into instability. My peace into a cry for help. It would have been laughable if it weren't so common. That's what people like them do when they lose their grip on someone who used to play along. They don't change. They reframe. But I wasn't angry. I was entertained. Because now they weren't just burning bridges. They were standing on them, striking matches, and wondering why the smoke was rising. A day later, my wife sent me a message directly. No emojis. No sugar. Just words. "I know we've made mistakes. But they're still my family. And I'm caught in the middle." That line. Caught in the middle. As if she hadn't stood beside them at the table. As if she hadn't laughed at their jokes while I stood in the kitchen, clearing plates. As if choosing to stay silent when I was being erased didn't place her on one side. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't caught in anything. I was walking out of it. By Friday, I got a ping from my HR system. Apparently, Patricia had followed up with another concerned citizen email. HR flagged it as potential harassment and asked if I wanted to escalate it formally. I declined, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need help protecting myself anymore. I'd already won. Because the more they flailed, the more they revealed. They couldn't understand how I stayed calm, how I didn't clap back online or throw their secrets into the wind. Because they were still trapped in the performance. And I had walked off the stage. That weekend, I took a train to visit Andre. We had lunch at a quiet diner. He told me about his startup idea, his mother's health, his dreams to build something that helped people, not just impress them. We didn't talk about Harper, or Patricia, or Grayson, because real life was happening. and I had stepped back into it. I watched him talk with light in his eyes, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not bitterness, but relief. Because while they were busy curating perfection, I had found something better, something real. And no brunch or email could ever match that. It was late afternoon when the knock came. Not rushed like someone in a panic. Not hesitant like a neighbor dropping by. Just steady, like the kind of knock that comes from people who believe they still have a right to be let in. I was in the middle of watering my small balcony garden. Nothing fancy, just some herbs, a couple of succulents. The kind of quiet company that grows without asking for applause. I like that about plants. They don't perform. They don't pretend. They thrive or they wither, and either way, they're honest. The knock came again. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked through the apartment, and paused at the door. 3 shadows stood behind the frosted glass. One tall, stiff posture, that had to be her father. The one fidgeting and checking her phone, Harper. And the shorter one in the middle, with a gift bag clutched in both hands, Patricia. Of course. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. They stared at me like I was a stranger who had stolen something from them. Patricia was the first to speak. "Hi," she said, offering that same brittle smile I'd seen 100 times at dinners when the conversation turned uncomfortable. "We didn't want to bother you. Just thought we could drop something off and maybe talk." She lifted the bag slightly, like it was a peace treaty. It was wrapped in gold, the tissue paper puffed up like frosting. I didn't touch it. Behind her, Harper gave a tight nod. Her father cleared his throat, but said nothing. I looked at them. The same 3 who had treated me like wallpaper for years. Who had edited me out of their gatherings with the precision of a social media crop tool. Who now stood on my doorstep, eyes searching for the man they never bothered to truly see. "We just wanted to make things right," Patricia said. Right. That word floated between us like perfume. Too sweet, too forced. "You've been ignoring our messages," Harper added. "We figured face-to-face might help." I didn't move, didn't smile, just let them fill the silence. Her father finally stepped forward. He had a card in his hand, one of those premium white ones with raised lettering. He held it like it meant something. "We came to apologize," he said. "You deserved better." It was rehearsed. I could tell. They had probably planned this the way they planned their holiday menus. Every word weighed, every sentence seasoned with just enough regret to sound real. Patricia held out the bag again. "We got you something small. Just a gesture." I glanced at it. A gesture. That's what I'd been to them. A gesture. A role. A quiet fixture in the background that made everything feel stable. Until I stopped. "Please," she whispered. "Can we come in?" She said it like it hurt to ask. I looked at them again. 3 people who once told me not to show up. Who said they'd pretend they didn't know me. Who had laughed while brushing me out of the picture, then panicked when the world noticed what they'd done. They hadn't come to apologize. They'd come to reset. To smooth it over. To stitch the narrative back together before anyone else noticed the tear. But I wasn't a loose thread. I was the fabric, and they'd never known it. "No," I said. Patricia blinked. Harper's lips parted like she wanted to protest, but nothing came out. Her father looked down at the card in his hand, then tucked it back into his coat pocket. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't explain. Didn't justify. Because when people choose to forget your worth, the worst thing you can do is remind them. They'll only remember long enough to use it again. So I kept my peace. Literally. I gently closed the door. Not a slam. Not a statement. Just a closing. A clear boundary. I stood behind it for a few seconds, listening. No footsteps. No yelling. Just silence. Eventually, the sound of heels on concrete. A car door shutting. Then another. And then they were gone. I turned back to my plants, watered the last one, and opened the window. Cool air swept in. Fresh. Honest. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. Because closure doesn't always come with big speeches or dramatic endings. Sometimes, it's just the quiet choice not to let people walk into your space with shoes still muddy from the last time they stepped all over you. Later that night, I opened the gift bag. Curiosity, not sentiment. Inside was a leather-bound notebook and a fountain pen. The card read, "For your thoughts. We hope you'll write again." I smiled. Not because it was thoughtful, but because they still didn't get it. I'd never stopped writing. I just stopped writing about them. I threw the card away. Kept the notebook. Because even if the gesture was hollow, the pages were still blank and mine to fill. And this time, I'd write only what mattered. No edits. No pretending. Just truth. It had been 2 weeks since they stood at my door with their gift bag and carefully chosen words. 2 weeks since I told them no. Since I chose not to open the door to the same people who once asked me not to show up at all. And in that time, not much changed on the surface. My apartment was still small. My routines remained the same. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, went to work. I watered my plants, read books. Sometimes I watched old films I'd forgotten I loved. But something inside me had shifted, something permanent. Not anger, not revenge. Just weight. Lifted. There's a certain kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting to be seen by people who've already made up their minds about you. It's not dramatic. It doesn't roar. It just settles. Like quiet snowfall in a forest where no one's watching. I had spent years trying to prove myself to people who were too busy performing their version of perfection to notice the man who swept the stage after they left. And I wasn't blameless. I allowed it, smiled through it, convinced myself that being needed was close enough to being loved, that being useful was enough. But usefulness wears out. Love doesn't. And the difference becomes clearer the day they stop needing you and forget you were ever there. That's the thing about being the invisible backbone. They only feel you when you walk away. I walked into my study and sat at the desk. On the wall above, it was a framed photo, me and Andre on his graduation day. He wore a borrowed cap, grinning like he had just conquered the world. I was in the background, slightly blurred, holding a small bouquet I had picked up on the way. No one asked who bought the flowers. No one tagged me in the photo. But I didn't mind, because I knew the story. And now, so did someone else. Grayson had never reached out again after that voicemail. He didn't need to. That single message had done more for my soul than a decade of forced acceptance from people who couldn't even remember who made the rice at Christmas. He saw me. And not for what I had, or what I gave, or who I stood beside in family photos, but for who I was, the man in the corner, the steady hand, the one who did good without needing to be applauded for it. And somehow, that mattered more than all the dinner parties and performative apologies combined. I pulled out the notebook Patricia had left behind and opened it. The leather was soft, too expensive, trying too hard to impress. But the pages were blank. And blank pages don't lie. I began to write. Not about them. Not about what they did. That chapter was done. I wrote about who I was becoming. A man who could say no without guilt. A man who could look in the mirror without needing someone else's reflection beside him to feel whole. A man who didn't need to prove his worth anymore, because it wasn't up for debate. By noon, the sun peeked through the clouds and spilled across the hardwood floor. I made tea, sat quietly with it. The stillness felt earned now. Not like loneliness, like peace. My phone buzzed once. A message from Andre. Guess who just got approved for his grant? I smiled. Proud of you. Couldn't have done it without you, Mr. R. You believed in me before I did. I didn't reply to that one. Because sometimes, the best replies are the ones you carry in your chest, not your phone. Later that day, I went for a walk through the park. The trees were bare, but the air was fresh. The kind of cold that wakes you up rather than weighs you down. I passed a bench I used to sit on during my lunch breaks, back when I worked across town. I remembered how I'd eat quietly, text my wife to ask what she wanted for dinner, and head home in time to make something before Patricia dropped by with complaints and condescension. Those days were gone, and I wasn't mourning them. In fact, I pitied them, because they had everything polished on the outside. Pearls, brand deals, curated smiles, but none of them knew what it felt like to be at peace without performance. They needed an audience. I had myself. That was enough. As I walked past a family building a snowman, I felt a wave of warmth. Not jealousy, not sadness. Just appreciation. For the simplicity of it. For the honesty. They weren't posing for likes. They weren't styling the snowman for a photo shoot. They were just living. Present. Laughing. Cold fingers and warm hearts. That used to be me. Before I got swept up in trying to fit into someone else's idea of value. Before I thought love had to be earned in silence. Now I knew better. I walked home slowly. There were still emails I hadn't answered. Still calls I had ignored. But there was no urgency anymore. Because I wasn't waiting for them to see me. They had their chance. They looked past me and paid the price for it. Now they were left with the echo of what they once had and the silence of a door that no longer opened for them. And me? I didn't ruin their Christmas. They did that themselves. I simply chose not to fix it. For once. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't raise your voice, or argue your worth, or demand an apology. Sometimes, The most powerful thing you can do is not show up.